All right, being 6 o'clock on Monday, December 2nd, I will call to order the Winooski Liquor Control Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Sure.
So we have one item on the agenda only for Liquor Control Board, and that is approval of a first-class liquor license and restaurant license for 12 Acres LLC, doing business as Schaefer's Market and Deli at 65 Winooski Falls Way, formerly Dutch Delicatessen. I believe we have a representative. Please join us. Could you introduce yourself? I didn't catch your name.
I'm Adam Schaefer.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I believe there's nothing from staff saying we shouldn't approve this. Is there anything, I noticed that it says formerly Dutch Delicatessen.
Yes.
Is there something changing about your business that you would like to share?
So it's going to be Schaefer's Market and Deli. We own another location in Middlebury. We're going to be changing the menu up, change some other things, keep things fresh, local as we can. Good food.
Any particular menu change you want to share?
We're going to be offering cheesesteaks and Beyond Burgers.
Oh,
And all our chicken is going to be from scratch, nothing frozen.
cool. Any questions or concerns from council? Nothing from the audience? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the first-class liquor license and restaurant license for 12 Acres LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
I would then entertain a motion to adjourn the Liquor Control Board meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First up is agenda review. Are there any proposed changes, concerns about the agenda order? Nothing from the public. We will move on to public comment. Seeing and hearing none, we can move on to our consent agenda. We have two items for approval. We have city council minutes from our November 4th and November 12th meeting. We also have payroll warrants ending November 3rd to November 16 and warrant as of November 25. Are there any questions or concerns about the minutes or warrants? I have one flag about the minutes. The meeting on November 12th, I think we called to order around 6:45 and the minutes say 6 p.m. right now. So with that change, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes and the warrants with the noted change.
Second. So moved.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to council reports. Can I start with you, Mike?
Sure. I don't have any reports.
All right.
I also do not have a report.
I have two items to share. I attended some presentations by students at Winooski High School on community. It was for a community problem-solving project, and they shared some kind of prototype ideas on improving communications and bringing student voice into governing decisions. They were sort of in a midpoint in this project, so I think they're going to invite community members back when they get to a more final stage, and at that time I think we could kind of share back whatever it is that they want to share out. I know our community services director, attended as well, and we both saw some interesting overlap with work that we are trying to do. Also interviewed candidates for open seats on Planning and Finance Commission, so in the next couple meetings, we should hopefully be doing some more appointments. I will pass it to you, Hal.
Sure. I attended the most recent Airport Commission meeting. There was a very robust public comment session. About half a dozen people speaking out against the F-35 and the noise mitigation issues. But what was really impressive was how Gene Richardson and his staff really try to reach out and I think try to build some relationships with some of the folks who are on the other side of the fence. So that to me was impressive. They also reviewed in general some of the projects that are ongoing that are underway to upgrade the airport and its services. I attended the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission meeting. It was basically an overview / orientation and the purpose, reviewing the purpose of the commission. Both chiefs, police and fire were there to, really explain their roles and their interests and their desires from this new commission, as well as Ray as well with the community service perspective. So I think it's off to a good start. People are really engaged. And then I was the representative for the council at the Charter Change Commission meeting. We had a great meeting. I think we've really focused on the work plan and what is in front of us. The goal is to really be strategic about engaging the community so we can get as much input as possible so we can come back to the council in June with a recommendation.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jim?
So Monday last week I attended the Housing Commission meeting, and the commission is focusing really on how parking minimums and parking requirements in general are affecting the provision of housing and affordable housing in the city. So that was this kind of structured discussion around some recommendations that could be made to the Planning Commission. So the Housing Commission went through each of those and modified or tabled or proceeded to or asked to move forward those to the Planning Commission. So that'll continue through some work that Heather's going to be doing to pass those along. And there was an update on the Memorandum of Understanding to operate the Housing Trust Fund. That's going to be going out for RFP soon, so that's been moved forward as well. But really good discussion on kind of what these parking requirements and parking minimums do for housing provision in the city.
Awesome, thank you. Moving on to city updates, Jesse.
Great, thank you. Just a couple updates tonight. Wanted to let you know that petitions are now available for those running for office on town meeting day in the city clerk's office. They are the return. They must be in no later than Friday, January 31st at 4:30. So plenty of time. But if anyone wants to get petitions going, they are now available. The mayor and Angela and I will be having our what the state auditor's office calls our exit conference with them on Wednesday to go over the findings of their 5-year audit. And we will have more to report on that at a future meeting. Wanted to just capitalize or underline a point Hal made about the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission. They did meet at their next meeting. That commission will be meeting with Omnis, who is the Parks and Open Space Master Plan consultant, to do the first of the, or not really the first, kind of the second big community outreach effort. They were here for the Festival of Pumpkins. They're going to use the next Safe Healthy Commission meeting on December 10th at 6:30 here in City Hall to do the next big presentation of their inventory analysis and to gather public feedback. So if people are interested, there's been a lot of chatter already online about that master plan. Please come out to that first public meeting. Angela and myself and Janet from the clerk's office and a union representative will start interviews tomorrow for the HR manager position. We got about 120 applications for that position, which is amazing. And so we are doing this first round of interviews this week and early next, and then the second round candidates will be brought to the full leadership team. And then finally, on kind of the fun side, first I want to congratulate the Senior Center. There was a VT Digger article today about highlighting the New American Lunch program with Agewell. It's a great article, some really great pictures of our Senior Center. So if you're interested in seeing that, it's posted, shared on our Facebook page. And congratulations to Barb and Ray and the team for moving that program along. And then registration is open for CPR and First Aid, American Sign Language, the Nordic ski program, youth indoor soccer, and our Chill Learn to Snowboard program. So if folks are interested in any of those, go to the Facebook page or the website and sign up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we can move now to our regular items, the first being potential approval of Community Health Centers of Burlington lease at the O'Brien Community Center, and Ray Coffey will join us.
Do you want a table? We were thinking CHCB was going to be here.
Yeah. But,
Are you-
I'm happy
okay?
to
Okay,
see what people want to do. We
great.
can talk through the details and go from there. So hello. So we had looked at this back on June 3rd. Council had approved a previous version of this lease. Since that time, CHCB has had some leadership change and came back to us requesting an update to the lease to make it not be a joint and several lease between both entities that are currently residing in that space, but in a lease exclusively with CHCB. Vermont Dental Care is on board with that. So basically, if this were approved, Vermont Dental Care would negotiate a sublease with Community Health Center of Burlington, and then we would get eyes on that before that gets signed off on. As I mentioned in the cover sheet memo here, literally the only change to that lease document is the striking of a sentence in the first preamble that states that the lease would be joint and several. So that goes away. CHCB becomes the lone kind of holder of that lease. So we're, as staff, comfortable with that as an approach. Again, Vermont Dental Care has expressed comfort with that. So we felt like it was enough of a change to the lease so that we wanted to come back and bounce that off of council. So,
So we're essentially moving the liability from both parties to just the one.
correct.
On our side.
Correct. Yep.
And they've been paid.
And yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, and as stated in the memo there too, they've been paying everything kind of functionally has been working really well since that approval on June 3rd. And that includes an increase in the lease payment to cover the cost over time of improvements to the HVAC system. So functionally, everything's going really well. It's just they wanted to change that detail of the lease with their new leadership.
Any questions or concerns from council? From the public? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the Community Health Centers of Burlington lease at O'Brien Community Center.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Jim, second by Amy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So we can move to item B, which is our FY21 proposed budget city manager's presentation.
So, is this, hopefully, technology here works. Oh, look at that. So a few statements just by way of introduction. One, I want to say, good job, council. You all picked up your budget books in advance. I am so impressed. Thank you for that. I went downstairs frantically at 4 to pick up the books to bring them up, and none to be found, so well done. So obviously Angela's here with me, and I want to start by just giving her a ton of credit for building this $15 million project, or $15 million budget. It's a huge project, and she did it in the same time as the annual audit and the TIF audit and many other things, so thank you to her. So tonight's presentation is really the big picture of the budget, and what we'll be going over tonight is high-level general fund budget and high-level all the other fund budgets. The point of tonight is really to couch that in the total questions you will be asking, and then each meeting from now on we'll be going through different service areas, getting really into the details. So tonight I'd really encourage you to think about what are the data points you're going to want to look at over the next 6 weeks or 2 months, and any other analysis or ideas you want us to start thinking about putting together information for. I'd also really encourage you to kind of lean into the idea that you are kind of the checks and balances on this budget that we've developed. If you have a question, it's likely that somebody else on the council has a question, and it's probably 100% true that somebody in the community has the same question. So please feel free to ask questions. We welcome those. The more questions, the more conversation we have during this process, I think the more faith the community will have in this budget as it moves forward. And then finally, just by way of introduction, this is a significantly different budget than last year's budget, and significantly different votes that will be going to town meeting. Last year was a really big year for our community. We took a couple of bond votes, we passed a new tax, we had a pretty big budget increase. With this budget, you'll see what we believe is a budget increase that's aligned with your goals, but a smaller aligned with cost of living increase. There are no bond votes being proposed. There are no big new revenue streams being proposed. We're really hoping that this kind of allows the community to calm down some of the big money discussions that have happened. So thank you for that, my ability to say those first few words. So this is what we're going to go over tonight. We're going to go over the process, what you initially established as council goals, the alignment to strategic vision, the overall general fund proposal. We're going to highlight that because that is the crossroads to the tax increase. The general fund is the fund that is funded by property taxpayers. So what ultimately the voters on town meeting day will approve. All the other funds you individually approve. We'll do a high-level overview of the funds, high-level overview of the reserves and the leverage fund reports, and then give you some direction on what is next. Does that make sense? And obviously you have this presentation in your budget book. It's also linked off the city's website, both on today's agenda as well as under city budgets. If you are watching and go to the city's website to city budgets, you will see this full budget book as well. So this is the process. In September, we talked about the timeline, and you approved that. And then in October, we had our goal setting session. Tonight, we're doing the high-level overview budget presentation. Next Monday night, you'll get the general government overview. So that's administration, that's parking, that's TIF primarily. December 16th, it'll be all about public works and capital projects. First of the year, we'll talk about community services and then public safety. On the 21st, we then have a meeting set aside solely for discussion and follow-up items. So if there are discussions that happen over the course of any of the other presentations that you want to dig in more to, or other projections you want to review, we'll bring those to you that night. And then January 27th is the deadline for approving the final budget and the amount to be raised by taxes that needs to be approved to send to the voters on town meeting day. February 19th, we'll have our community dinner to review the budget with the community. The night before town meeting, we do the town meeting day presentation with the school. And then obviously town meeting day is March 3rd this year. Just to review the budget goals that you previously discussed, although were not voted on, you asked us to present an FY21 budget that provides level services, continue doing what we're doing. You asked us to present a budget that continues our commitment to the Myers Memorial Pool that's currently under construction and will be fully operational in the budget year that this budget considers, and to present a budget that continues the city's commitments to the other priorities and strategies. So it's really important. This budget process is the biggest policy decision you all make in a year. It's really how we use other people's monies, whether it's ratepayers or property taxpayers, to fund the services offered by the community. So it's important to remember kind of where we currently are, and kind of couch this money conversation in the humans and the priorities we have as a community. So you've seen this before, and again, this is in your budget book. This is our org chart. So we are a full service city providing police, fire, public works, community services, and general administration. I think it's also important to couch these conversations in where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Again, as a policy document, you are allocating the money to fund the priorities that we have previously discussed. So I'm not going to read these slides. You'll see this repeated through the departmental presentations as well. But I think it's really important to kind of reflect back on what we did last year. So what's presented here is the FY19 accomplishments. So just highlight a few. We adopted a master plan. We finished the final engineering for the pool. We did $5 million of capital work this summer. We had an equity summit. We started the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. We've done a lot of work together that align to that strategic vision. This year that we're currently in, so the budget that was approved last town meeting day, these are the things that we see as accomplishments already this year, or things that are on track to be accomplished. So, you know, you've heard us talk about wayfinding. We've received a grant to do historic preservation work. We're looking to continue the equity work. We're well under construction for the Myers Memorial Pool, et cetera, et cetera. And then looking forward to FY21, this is, with the development of this budget, is the first time staff start looking at what is our recommendation going to be to you for FY21 goals. Obviously, those aren't formally set until after town meeting day when the new council is seated and we do that work plan together. But because this is the budget that will determine those priorities, help inform those priorities, we think it's important to call out. Again, what you see here is a lot of continued work. What we're not proposing this year are, again, are big new capital investments, big new projects. We're really looking to continue, to operationalize the pool, to move forward with implementing wayfinding, to move forward with Main Street, and we'll have a larger conversation about that on the 16th, to move forward with the Housing Trust Fund and our work with Champlain Housing Trust, to finish the Parks and Open Space Plan and start implementing that. So if that makes sense, that we're not, there's no new big proposal that you haven't thought of yet here. It's all really continuing the existing proposals. So what does that mean for the general fund? So before you tonight is a FY21 proposed general fund budget of $7.6 million, with taxes to be raised at $5.9 million. It's a 2.45% tax rate increase from this year. What you see here is the FY20 tax rate that we're currently in and the percent change from the FY19 tax rate. That 5.6 number was what we invested in to start paying the debt service on Main Street and the debt service on the pool. And then the FY21, we're really trying to step that back to closer to cost of living. Of that 2.45% tax rate increase, 1.55% of that is solely for pool operations, solely to realize this new community facility that we have invested in. And what does that mean for a taxpayer? So a home assessed at $225,000, the projected tax bill will go up for the year $62, about $15.50 a quarter. Overall, it's about $40 for pool operations and about $23 for general government operations. Does that make sense? And please stop me at any time if you have questions. So want to be really clear about what assumptions are behind this budget document. There's hundreds of line items with a lot going into it, so I want to be clear about what we're assuming. So we are assuming a 2% cost of living increase that is either contractually in our union contracts or that we will give to our non-union folks. Based on analysis by our city assessor and our planning and zoning manager, we are anticipating a 0.8% increase in the grand list. So that's based on actual permits that have been pulled or projects we know are in the pipeline. So that's about $58,000 of new revenue in FY21. Our health insurance, as you probably read in the news, we get our health insurance through Vermont Health Connect. Our rates are going up about 10.5% in January, starting next month. And we are projecting a 9% increase for January 2021. Health insurance, unlike other benefits, is a calendar year benefit, not a fiscal year benefit, so we're always looking a year ahead and projecting that number. And then we're also assuming a pretty big increase in our local options tax revenue. We had projected and budgeted to receive $277,000 in this year, FY20, as a result of implementing that local options tax. We received the first quarter payment of that around November 18th. And based on that projection, so it's 1 quarter's worth of data, we are estimating that revenue for FY21 will be $355,000, so quite a significant jump.
I'd like to jump in for a second.
Yeah, please.
So first I just want to thank you all for the hard work putting this together. I personally was impressed to see the initial numbers of a general rate increase that's around cost of living while we are adding significant funding for pool operations and other projects. I think the local options tax clearly is helping us here as a benefit that I'm glad voters approved that as a new revenue stream. And just as a point for us to consider and for residents to understand, we are annually seeing grand list growth of about 1%, right, year to year?
A little less than 1%.
Right, and so we're getting $60,000 from that. We employ staff, cost of living always increases, and if we want to maintain the services we have, taxes always will increase because the revenue doesn't match that increase to hire the people that we hire. I think that often gets lost when we're thinking about, why are taxes always going up? So I just wanted to call that out for us to also think about in the future when, we have these discussions about alternative revenue streams.
Excellent point. One other point I want to make about the local options tax is, and I think we talked about this last year when we were putting it on the ballot for last town meeting day. We did not project any impact from the what's called the Wayfair case, which was the case about sales tax being applied to online purchases. That was implemented after the most recent data we had to project that $277,000 number. So we had no way of knowing what that impact was going to have in Winooski. Angela and I, having kind of dug into the numbers, that delta, that quarterly difference that we were projecting versus what we saw in that first payment is really all due to sales tax and all due to those online purchases. So when you think about, this is my commentary for a minute, when you think about online purchases deteriorating downtowns and communities, this is a way that online purchase actually put money back into local communities because they're paying sales tax on the point of delivery, not the point of the online retailer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the next two slides give you a high-level overview of what is included in this budget. So there are some lines that have changed quite significantly, so we want to be sure that we really call those out from the start. So to start with staffing for the strategic vision, this budget does anticipate adding an equipment operator 1, which is kind of an entry-level public works position, primarily to support the Myers Memorial Pool and summer maintenance. As well as improve our winter operations. This is a net new add of $28,000 to the general fund. That does not mean that person makes that amount of money. That is the number of new tax dollars we need to raise because we will be eliminating one seasonal public works position and our plowing contract to offset that increase. We are recommending with losing our beloved Julie, our HR manager, who's a 32-hour-a-week position, we are recommending moving that to a 40-hour-a-week position with the kind of complex HR things we are facing, as well as a focus on our equity work and really trying to diversify our workforce and get us ready to be a more diverse workforce. We thought, and to recruit the best talent we could to the position, we thought it was pretty important to add those 8 hours a week. That is an add to the budget of $12,000, almost $13,000, which is broken out across funds. We are recommending adding 8 hours, Angela, correct me if I say something wrong. We are recommending adding 8 hours a week of per diem fire coverage, which is an addition of $10,000. We are recommending adding 1 election worker per election in FY20, which is a whopping $550. But considering that we are anticipating some quite large elections in 2020 and have really been seeing a kind of backlog at the polls at times, we want to make sure that people are getting the best service and know what's going on during those busy times. And then we are recommending adding a community risk reduction intern from St. Michael's for the summer at $6,000. As you probably know, St. Michael's has quite a large public safety organization and focus. They provide all of our emergency medical technician service here in the city. We have had good luck last year having an intern from St. Mike's to help with the rental registry, and we're looking to duplicate that in the fire service over the summer. Often these are students who are rising sophomores who then stay and support the fire department for their last 2 years as on-call firefighters as well, which is a great addition to our community. At a high level, we wanted to call out the Myers Memorial Pool operations. You'll hear much more about this during the community services presentation. But basically the new operating revenues are about $55,000, and the new operating expenses are $143,000, which leads to the 1.5% tax rate increase to fund those operations.
Can I jump in on that?
Sure.
When we do get that presentation
Yeah.
from community services,
Mm-hmm.
looking back at the proposals and paperwork that we reviewed before voting on that, the operations were only projected around 80,000, 80 to 90. So I would love to dig into that.
Sure.
I
Thank
do
you.
want to note that one of the things that is included in that 143 is a portion of that equipment operator, which was not in the original pool forecasts.
Okay.
But we can do a side-by-side comparison of those two. We want to call out the O'Brien Community Center. As some of you know, last year was the first year we brought it into the general fund budget. Historically, the OCC had been an enterprise fund, so meant to be self-supporting. We were spending down the reserves on that building very quickly and had no more reserves left, so the OCC needed to come into the general fund budget at the recommendation of our auditors. So with full tenancy, we are now subsidizing OCC operations at $22,000 a year, which means we are raising $22,000 from taxpayers to fund the operations of the OCC. With this budget, we are also recommending discontinuing the leases that the community services team and the library paid for their space at the OCC. You know, we don't lease this building to general admin, we don't lease the fire department to the fire, et cetera, et cetera. So we were trying to make that more consistent, given that it is a city-owned building. So there's two changes in the budgets that you'll see as a result of that. One, we are eliminating the library lease payment, which is a general fund payment. So it becomes that revenue stream comes out of the general fund budget, but so does the expenditure stream. So it's a wash. There's no tax impact to that. The community services enterprise fund, recreation fund, was paying about $63,000 or $6,300 in a lease payment from that community services fund to the general fund. So with operations costs and that lost revenue, we're going to raise another $7,000 of property tax money to offset that change. Does that make sense? I feel like my budget book was not super clear about that.
That used to be coming from reserves,
That used to
and
be
now we're just moving it to a regular expense and taxes.
Well, so the larger number, the $22,000 used to be much larger. It was closer to $40,000 or $50,000. So with full tenancy, that number has come way down. But we used to be using reserves to fill that gap. Now that we no longer have reserves, we have to raise the money to fill that gap.
The reserves balance was fully depleted in FY19.
So at a high level, again, you'll hear much more about this at the individual presentations. On the capital side of things, again, no big new bonds. What's in the capital plan are existing debt service for the pool and Main Street. We have increased funding for the council's priorities for sidewalk improvements in FY21, and we are planning to replace a 2006 Public Works truck. We are also making incremental change to increasing our contributions to our community partners, where we have historically not fully funded our contribution. So we are recommending $67,000 or $6,700 to step up into paying for half of the school newsletter, which was a proposal we entered into with the school last year. So that's to print and distribute the school newsletter. It's about $40,000 a year. So we made an agreement with the school that we would incrementally increase up to paying half of that over 3 years. Last year we budgeted $6,700. This year we're budgeting another $6,700. Next year we'll be fully up to that half point contribution point. You likely have seen in the school newsletter that we are taking a more active role to kind of curate the city pages and really have that be a communication tool for the city. And Paul and Emily at the school, at the city and school, have done a great job working together on that. That $6,700 is actually sitting in the Winooski Community Development Fund budget, so not in the general fund budget. We are recommending increasing the Winooski Valley Parks District allocation $1,000 and increasing the Channel 17 contribution $1,000 as well. So again, incrementally stepping up to what those partners are looking for. And then the other significant increase we wanted to call out was planning for the emerging issue of needing a new financial technology system. We have not yet heard from Department of Taxes about what new statewide assessing system that they're going to be using. We talked about this a little at our priority setting session. We anticipate that we may need to move to a new system, so we are setting aside funds to be able to do that in FY21. This would be an annual licensing fee. We would likely need additional startup funds as well, but those would be one-time expenses. I think it's always important to call out what is not included in budget proposals. So what's not included in here is any new money that we would potentially need for regional dispatch. We have in this budget is fully funding our current dispatch model. If we need additional funds for that or move forward with that, we will be coming back to you at a separate time to have that conversation. The Public Safety Authority is not ready to put forward financial models yet. We have not included any funding in this budget to offset the Department of Justice JAG funding, grant funding that we lost as a result of our fair and impartial policing policy. So we are kind of zeroing out that grant fund. And then we have not included in here currently any funding to expand the community liaison or equity work. We have started to cost that out based on conversations I have heard about. We believe that to fully expand that liaison program would be about $73,000 a year. We currently are carrying the $5,000 in this current budget for lowering barriers as we've done for the last 2 years. So it would be a net new tax increase of $68,000 or about another 1.2% tax rate increase. We also, of course, are going after the Working Communities grant to try and bring in a new revenue stream to support this work as well.
Do we have any leftover of the 5,000 from this fiscal year?
Yes, I think you have all.
Yeah, we have not spent that this year.
Okay.
I think there are some ideas of how to spend that, but you have not spent that yet.
We'll keep that in mind.
So the next series of slides are just trying to present this picture in a different way, thinking about revenue areas and service delivery areas. So this is just the $7.6 million general fund. So of that general fund, 83% of that comes from property taxes and pilot payments. The next biggest percent of that comes from intergovernment transfers. So that's transfers we're allowed to make from other enterprise funds to the general fund to support administration specifically. And then on the expenditure side of the general fund, the biggest percent of the general fund is spent on police services. That's 34%, with public works coming in second at 16%. I think it's really important to note that police is staffed 24/7, 365. There's always police officers and dispatchers on duty, which is a very different staffing model than community services or public works. And these slides are all in the budget book as well if folks want to dig in more into the numbers. And then I think it's also important to remember so we talk a lot about the general fund because that is what's raised by property taxpayers. The general fund is actually only 51% of our total operating budget for the city. The total operating budget for the city is proposed to be $15 million. 50% of that is the general fund, 22% of that is the TIF budget. So again, that is property tax payment, but that's solely going to debt service payment and includes a significant portion of the education property tax that's collected as well. And then you see broken out parking fund, water, wastewater, etc. And then if you aggregate that all together, to me, this is really the value slide. So this is what we have. This is how we have determined to split, to invest in different service areas in the city. So looking across funds, we're investing about 30% of all our dollars in public works and capital planning, 22% of our dollars in that TIF repayment, 18% in police, 10% in administration, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? So just a quick couple of highlights of other funds. As we established or talked about last year and did last year, we are recommending annual rate increases to water and wastewater. As you see here with a water increase, we are still on par with the 2018 comparable data from our surrounding communities. With the wastewater increase of 4%, we're still significantly below the 2008 regional average. These rate increases are both needed because we really aren't funding any capital work right now within our rate structure. So in order to start, we've been using reserves to pay for capital work, and we are depleting our reserves. So we need to start building up that capacity. If people are interested, we can pull up this analysis again. It is referred to in the narrative in your budget book. Last year when we were looking at these rate increases, it was the first time there had been rate increases since 2012. And John and I looked back to, and Angela looked back to, I think, 1996, and found that what was basically happening in the city is that we were not increasing rates for years at a time and then doing pretty significant 15, 18, 20% rate increases. And if we average that out over the last 25 years, it was really averaging to around these rate increases. So we were making the recommendation that instead of holding off and having a significant increase in 1 year, doing that incremental change would be better. But that is a call for you all to make.
Jesse, I have a question about this. I know last year when we had this discussion, at least for the water, we did, with the increase, increase our contributions to reserve, or like to what we were saving for capital planning. So like right now, you're like the rates, it's not enough to keep us up with the needs of capital improvements. Do you all foresee a point where we get there, where the rate matches what we need to be planning for capital improvements?
Yes, John has done that projection out 10 or 20 years. And
So this may come in our future presentation.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, we can provide it in a future presentation.
Thank you.
I should caveat that to say, and we can have a much longer conversation about this later in December, but there is a difference between funding the current capital projects that are on the books and funding the true amount of preventative maintenance you need to do to cycle through. Almost no community funds at the latter rate, so it's a balance of funding those kind of priority projects and what the community can afford. But we will
Like my own home.
much like your own home. On the tax increment financing fund, we are prioritizing our external debt obligations. I'm going to talk about that in the paragraph below. And when you see the TIF budget at the next Monday's meeting, you will see some very different numbers than those who reviewed the TIF model last year, and that is a result of our global settlement that you all approved. So with that global settlement that we entered into last spring, with that $1 million payment of the ground lease, that changes the projections quite significantly on the TIF So related to that, one of the things we had done within the TIF fund in past years was decrease our payments to ourselves on the Winooski Community Development Fund. So just a little bit of background here. So during the inception of the TIF, the Winooski Community Development Corporation was a standalone entity. It took on debt, it pooled parcels, and really got the TIF district up and running. When that organization dissolved, it returned the repayment of the note it had given the city to the community development trustees, which are the city are named as the city council. So you are actually the recipient of $1 million loan in the TIF district as the CDC trustees. There's a payment schedule for that, but it is approved by you all. So when the TIF fund was really kind of teetering on the 1-to-1 debt service coverage ratio that we have to maintain. We have to maintain a certain amount of dollars in to be able to pay our debt obligations. We stepped back that payment to ourselves. Now that we are projecting with the global settlement and the development that we know is going to happen to be able to continue to meet that 1-to-1 debt service coverage ratio, we're recommending increasing that repayment to ourselves. So going from an allocation this year of $150,000 loan payment to $200,000 loan payment. That community development fund funds part of Heather, part of Paul, part of Eric, also funds the website, some grant matches, things that are really considered community development per the covenants of the note. We also are maintaining a good, I think, reserve balance in that fund. With this budget, it will be over $250,000, which we have talked about as a funding source to buy down the debt on the Abenaki garage. It could be used for other community development oriented projects in the future as well. Does that make sense? A few more highlights from other funds. So in the parking fund, we are anticipating the new bonding for the Abenaki Way garage, as well as funding for wayfinding signage and kiosks. The Community Justice Fund does reflect the direction we've received from the Department of Corrections that fully funds the CJC here in Winooski. They have indicated this year that we are not allowed to hire one of the positions and therefore we have decreased our projected revenues. This budget isn't set by the state until May or June with the state budget. So kind of a guess until we know that. Having said that, we do want to call out there is a countywide conversation happening about community justice and the DOC's inclination to not fund the 5 different CJCs there are in the region. So Eli and myself and the chief are working with our neighboring communities to think about, is there a more effective way we can offer these services? Eli and I are really committed to, even if it's administered at a different location, that services be provided here in Winooski. So that's kind of the value we are holding on to through these conversations. So potentially more to come on that.
Is that decrease reflective of how successful we've been?
No, that decrease is reflective of statewide budget cuts. So the Department of Corrections allocation to CJCs statewide has been decreasing. And then in addition to that, Chittenden County receives significantly more DOC funding for CJC than any of the other counties across the state. And they're looking to distribute that differently.
Okay.
It is definitely not a reflection on service delivery.
Mm-hmm.
In the Community Services Fund, one of the things we want to highlight from the beginning is we do anticipate using $25,000 from Thrive reserves to fund our current operations for Thrive. That is similar to what we've done in past years. The problem with that is we are spending down that reserves too quickly. We will not be able to do that again in FY22. So that we as staff need to come up with a plan for how to operate that program beyond the life of those reserves. And then finally, in the rental registry, we are increasing revenues a bit to reflect current growth and partnerships. We continue to contribute to fund balance here, and again, have this idea of using that fund balance for a compliance loan program aligned to likely the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or other similar programs. So those are high-level overviews of funds you'll hear much more about in the coming weeks. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I want to call your attention to, this is a new report we are including this year as part of the budget. It starts on page 53 of your budget book. This is something that the previous council had asked for over time, which is looking at how many outside dollars we are bringing into the city for specific projects and operations. So this is just a snapshot of that fund for Main Street and the Myers Memorial Pool. So for the pool, for example, only 85% of that, of the funding for that is coming from the taxpayers. The balance of 15% is coming from other revenue streams, which I think tells, tries to tell this story of we are looking for, to the mayor's introductory point, we are really looking for those different revenue streams to pull into city operations. So in your leverage funds report, you'll see that Angela has put together these leveraged funds reports for all of the big projects for which we got outside funding.
So I did the math on that, and I might have screwed up, but I think it came out to about almost $6 million in outside sources and like 18% of the total cost of these large projects. So
That's pretty good.
it's substantial.
Yeah. That's substantial. Well done, grant writers and grant administrators.
Yes.
And thank you for the freedom to go after some of those big grants.
Also our pool committee donors.
And our pool committee donors, absolutely. So again, this is a little hard to read on the screen, but just want to draw your attention to it. It is on page 62 of the budget book. If people want to go to the website and see a bigger version of this. I think it's important as we talk about using reserves to fund capital and one-time expenses as part of the budget to keep in mind what the overall reserves picture is. We tend to focus on this lower right-hand corner number, which is $343,000 at the end of FY19 that is unassigned fund balance. Those are the dollars we can use for whatever you all vote to use them for. That's an important number to focus on, but it's also important to realize that almost $6 million in reserves that are dedicated to something else, like our 30-day cash on hand policy, or almost 3.2 million assigned to specific other projects.
I had a question on here. Most of these make sense to me, but I am not clear what line 700 operating reserve refers to.
So we have a fund that is dedicated for operating reserves. It is made up primarily of money that comes from the state for per parcel payments that is being set aside for reappraisal.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. And so to wrap up, what can you expect in the next weeks? So we will have weekly department presentations with a couple week break for the holidays. The final votes that will be required from you are approving the general fund budget with a specific amount to be raised by property taxpayers for the town meeting day warning. Approval of all the individual enterprise and special revenue funds, so all those funds that aren't the general fund, you approve by voice vote. And then approval of any associated rate increases or fee increases that result from these discussions. So 3 votes this year, not the 6 you had last year. So it's going in the right direction. And then finally, just want to thank you for, this is a lot of information. It's a 116-page budget. I want to thank you again for picking up your budget books and putting so much time and effort into reviewing so much material. And thanks to the entire leadership team that developing this document, and this budget is truly a joint effort from beginning to end. So Angela leads the effort and we all follow her, but it really is a team effort now. That is all I have.
So we'll have the opportunity to dive in
Mhm.
in the upcoming meetings, but if there's general questions you have, or if you can preview, you know, this is a data point or something that I would like you to bring forward.
When we discussed the wastewater and stormwater funds, I would love to see, similar to how you project would be the impact on a $225,000 home, what it might be on the average bill per quarter or whatever it is.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the public? Any comments?
One question I would be interested in hearing more about is what's been done to, I feel like we might have talked about this before, with the lost JAG funding, how's that been made up? And how much of that is coming from things like forfeitures, or seizures? And I'm definitely interested to hear more about the Thrive program, and what, staff has in mind for that.
Great.
And then I wanted to ask one other question about pool operations. So the pool was closed and there had been money allocated that fiscal year for operations in the pool. Is there some history that can be provided for the council and public on what, how that end of operations ended up playing into the tax rate and budget for that year and the year following?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will start that, but then may pass to Angela and Ray, who were here at that time. So my understanding of when the pool stopped operating was that the city was in a very different financial position than it's currently in. We're in a fairly healthy financial position at the moment. So in the years immediately prior to the pool closing, there had been significant reductions in force, significant layoffs in the city, and with the closing of the pool, they prioritized using that tax capacity, using that money that otherwise was spent on maintaining the pool to maintaining other staffing levels. Therefore, that tax capacity wasn't set aside for future pool operations. It was essentially used for other operations, which is why we are now needing to kind of build back up that operation value. I don't know if Ray and Angela, you want to add any context to that?
Prior pool operations were significantly less than this budget. We had about maybe $45,000–$50,000 annually budgeted for the pool. In the year where operations ceased, $16,000 of the 50 or so thousand that had been previously budgeted was earmarked to be set aside, so we didn't have to raise so much for taxes in the future when we got a pool back, and it was put into special items for the recreation programs to run programs for kids to attend in the summer. The next year, that got cut back from 16,000 to 8,000. So we lost a little bit more, and so now we're going to have a space where they can operate new programs. So there was a conscious decision made to not remove that $8,000 that they've got remaining in those specialized supplies to allow them to operate programs in that space, since that $8,000 wasn't really going to get us a whole lot in the new pool operations.
So, sorry, that's saying that there's some other summer activity operations that are expected to take place at the pool, but that's not included in the operating expenses of the pool as listed here.
Yeah, no, it's a potential for programming that could be held in the community space.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions for this evening?
So I would encourage you, as we go through this process, if there's anything that comes up as you're looking at, looking through this book more or reviewing other reports, if you have questions, please feel free to email those. We'd be happy to respond, either respond by email or bring that information to a future council meeting. So please feel free to poke at it.
I will just say last year when this was new to me, I went through it probably in too much detail. And then had a sit down with Angela and Jesse and talk through where I had questions, and it was really helpful to get more context and clarity ahead of coming to the meeting, so I knew what I really wanted to focus on.
Thank you.
I've lost my agenda somewhere in here. Here we go. Okay. Moving on to item C, potential approval of a resolution on community services fees, and Ray will join us again.
Right. Hello again. So we, per section 19401 of the city charter, are required to have fees established via ordinance for all fees in the city. And one way that we have worked to address kind of the more episodic or short time frame fees for community services, like program fees, is to do that by resolution. So this is a format that hopefully folks have seen in the past. It's been a little while since we've added a new fee to the mix, so I guess maybe this could be a new approach for a few of you, but essentially this resolution here is requesting permission to charge the fees listed here for upcoming programs. And that's, again, driven by language within our charter that requires fees to be set by ordinance.
I kind of remember this from last year. We made a decision about not having to go through the process of updating ordinance all the time for
Correct.
some of these classes or programs that change.
Yep, so
periodically.
resolution was sort of the resolution,
Mhm.
as it were.
Any questions or concerns from council?
Just curious how you came up with the rates. Is it
Yeah.
assuming it's similar to what other municipalities are charging? Or?
It is, and we've tried to be, just below, I think, in order to be sensitive to the demographics here socioeconomically, and be competitive, frankly. But for both CPR and sign language, those rates are largely driven by the instructor, and then we're adding on a slight fee that the city brings in per enrollee to kind of help with some of our administrative costs. Youth soccer is one that we are really driving at kind of across the 3 seasons, fall, winter, and spring, generally breaking even. So that's a partnership program with the Vermont Patriots nonprofit. So that $20 price point is actually very low compared to Farpost and Nordic and some of the other club soccer programs. But one of the kind of underpinnings of the Vermont Patriots program, and one that's really spoken to us, is accessibility and affordability. So we're trying to keep that price point really low. So as a, for instance, winter is going to be more expensive because we're paying for indoor space, but fees from the fall are going to help offset the costs of that indoor space. So, so far so good. The finances of that program are working for us. We've had 100 kids, 100 plus kids in the fall. We're right around 70 right now signed up for winter sessions, which is pretty exciting.
Any other questions? Questions from the public? So I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution on community services fees.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by House, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Did I?
Aye.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. We will move to item D, potential approval of general fund reserve request for emergency HVAC repairs at City Hall and the Police Department. And John Rusher will join us.
Good evening.
Welcome.
So this is for a general fund reserve request for emergency HVAC repairs at, here at City Hall, actually this room, and downstairs in PD. So the total request is $36,600. All but about $3,900 of that work has already been completed, since it was emergency repairs. And just to give you an overview, so police department was the larger ticket item. That was $25,374. That work was done late this summer. So we had a report from staff of moldy, mildew, air, and we had an outside vendor come in to look at cleaning ductwork and inspecting ductwork. They did find within the porous insulation media within the ductwork some microbial growth, they call it. So we released them to clean as much ductwork as they could, and they had to do some replacement as well. So that total work was completed, and we spent the money in the operations line for the PD building, PD space. That's about $2,500 a year, so we've overspent that line. So that's why we're asking for the reserve balance request. And then on the city hall side, so this space up here, there's a furnace upstairs, 20 plus years old. When they turned it on for heating season, they found that the heat exchanger was cracked. So beyond repair, 20-year-old plus unit. So that was replaced, and total price tag for that work is $11,226. There's $3,900 for remaining work, and that's to do the AC condensing unit that's outside. They would do that work in the spring, so we wanted to take care of the emergency heating furnace work first. The total, we're already changing the budget, of course, after you just got the presentation. So the total impact to the reserve fund balance would be the $36,600. I think right now we're looking at approximately $343,257, which would reduce it to $306,657.
Any questions or concerns from council? Would you say that the issue with the microbial moldy mildew air ducts is prevented with the work that's been done?
Yeah, so the issue downstairs is the duct banks are a little larger than what they need to be. So there's been some moisture buildup. So we've had some ports installed for inspection as we do preventive maintenance every year. So we can keep an eye on it and do preventive cleaning annually. So not necessarily totally prevented, but at least we can do some cleaning and look at potential less expensive options like dehumidifiers, say, on the system down the road.
Okay.
What's the lifespan of these? Do you know the lifespan of, I mean, they're 20 plus years old. I mean,
Yeah.
Should there been a preemptive check on those? So would it be an emergency so we could have bid it out to maybe get a cheaper price on it?
Yeah, so ideally, the lifespan is about 20 years on those furnaces. So they were on their last legs.
Okay.
That was one we knew we had to keep an eye on, but as I came in, we've only had about 2 years to start putting money in towards reserve funds. So the only other HVAC systems that really we need to keep an eye on are at the OCC, the health and dental unit. Those are starting to get of age, and we're starting to look at putting reserve money towards those. The other system in this building is I'd say newer. I don't know what the age is, but it's less than 10 years old. So, but that's something, as Jesse mentioned in the slide, a capital needs assessment. So, looking at the big ticket items like HVAC, roofs, electrical, the stuff when it dies and it has a useful life, we start putting money away towards replacement.
So I'm thinking emergency call tends to be a little more expensive than being preemptive. Now, the other thing too is your maintenance in place for these items, so learning curve doesn't happen again, or get more lifespan out of them?
Yeah, so we have preventive maintenance contracts for both those units. So twice a year, we have someone come in and do the preventive maintenance on them.
Any other questions or concerns? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the general fund reserve request for emergency HVAC repairs at City Hall and the Police Department.
So,
Second?
Motion by Mike, second by Amy. All those in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And our final item for discussion to be presented by Jesse Baker is about state cannabis legislation.
Quite a little shift here for a minute. So this is a request from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns included in your packet is a communication from their municipal policy advocate, Gwen, as well as a draft resolution. So a little background on this is, as you know, the legislature is looking at this session, looking at legalizing a commercial cannabis marketplace. So not just legalizing the ability to have marijuana, but actually legalizing a system by which it can be sold in a retail establishment. So the league is advocating for, during those discussions, that if that is going to be legalized, if that is legalized by the legislature, this resolution doesn't make any comment on whether it should be legalized or not, but if it is legalized, the league is really advocating for a 5% local options tax to be applied to those sales. I think right now, and Hal, please correct me if you have additional information, the state is looking at about an 18% sales tax on commercial cannabis. So the league is saying if there's an 18%, some of that should be shared at the local level, because the municipalities and the communities are where there is going to be potential negative impacts as a result of that marketplace. So they're advocating for a 5% local options tax, of which 70% of those revenues would stay in the host community, and then 30% of the revenues would go to other communities where there isn't a commercial marketplace. So they are asking all municipalities to adopt a resolution aligned to the one that is before you tonight, essentially advocating for that, so they can have those resolutions to take to the legislature and say your communities are asking for support if you choose to do this. The reason I thought it was important to bring it to you is Heather and I have already experienced businesses looking to locate here in Winooski. We anticipate that if there is approved commercial cannabis, we will have a retail location here in the city, in which case, if there is an option to get a new revenue stream from that, we should advocate for that and explore that. This is only on as a discussion tonight. I don't need you to take any action, but the league is looking for action in the month of December so that they can be poised for the start of the legislature in January. And Hal, I don't know if you have other insights from your state rep role.
Well, I just know that the 18% number is a sensitive one because we're trying to be competitive with like Massachusetts, so that's the only other tidbit I'd offer. We did spend quite a bit of time in GovOps looking at S69, which came from the Senate, and we'll be right at it when we get back in session.
So I actually, a question for both of you related to being sensitive to being competitive. Looking at other states that have legalized commercial markets, sales tax was typically 2 to 3%, and then there's like an excise tax for the state, more behind the scenes from the consumer, right? Like this resolution for me definitely gets at the fact that there should be some revenue for the localities that are being impacted. But I don't necessarily personally agree with all of the specifics in it. And what I'm wondering on is the way these sort of resolutions impact the legislators at work. Like, do you think it's likely that in the House or the Senate they would be taking specific items out of here? Or is it more of a, you know, the general thing that we're trying to get at here is to make sure there is support for localities?
Well, I think first and foremost we want to have a regulated system that's going to be safe, and so we're really concerned about how do we best do that. So it's and the other real concern is the illicit market. So how do you price it in such a way so that you're not, you know, giving into the illicit market? And that's a real tightrope that we have to try to figure out. But I think this kind of resolution would certainly have weight, because if it's coming from a number of cities and towns, it's going to have our attention. So.
And just to add to that, I think I have put this before you exactly as the league is recommending.
Mhm.
You certainly can change it. If there are specific whereases or other things you want to advocate for, by all means, we can change the language. I think from here, my conversations with the league, what they're really looking for is that if it is going to be a taxed product, that some of that tax is shared with municipalities. So I think I guess in theory, you could take a position as elected body that you don't believe in that and want to say the opposite. But I'm assuming that you want to say something similar to that. I think if that intent remains, then all the other language, if there's other language you want to see reflected, that certainly is fine.
I'm not sure if this constitutes for this, but are we gonna look into locations of where they're gonna be set up? Is that something we wanna,
I think that would depend on whatever gets legislated, right? Like,
because obviously you can't, if we have a new building on Main Street that's on the main line of the schools, I don't think that's an appropriate place to put one of these shops setups. You know, I mean,
Well, I think cities and towns will have
the say of where.
say in zoning and how you're gonna allow for these
Allow for that.
operations to set up, yeah.
so
So
this is what, some of the key points in here are making sure legislation addresses impacts on municipalities, schools, first responders, local licensing and permitting, having local control commission similar to liquor control.
Mhm.
I don't personally offhand know what specifics we have in place about locating like alcohol establishments, but it sounds like this is advocating to give us similar authority there to make those decisions.
Because in the past, being, you know, a lifetime ago, I bartended, and I know that one of the establishments in Winooski was having a hard time because it was right on Main Street in the face of the walkway of children walking by the establishment. So that's why I'm just thinking, I don't know if it belongs in this language, or we need to do it locally, or if it goes to the state. I mean, it's something that we should consider anyway, so exposure's not
Mhm.
going into the wrong hands or being seen by the wrong eyes.
Mhm.
We do also have, Eric's not here to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there is, in our zoning laws for gateway districts and downtown, there's a limit to advertising,
Mhm.
which would essentially, you know how like downtown there's just like it can be very small signs at the restaurants that kind of show that there's alcohol there. That would apply to any new businesses or new developments, I'm pretty sure.
Or to the tobacco products. I know the advertising for tobacco products is tight knit too now, so it'd be kind of the same thing, maybe?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also, when we got the bill from the Senate, there was zero money for prevention and education. So we put $3 million into it because we think that's just a starting point.
Right.
It's gotta be robust, so it'll address the issues that you're concerned about. So kids know and understand, what this really is about, so.
So if I can call your attention to just two things. One, this fourth whereas stanza here in this resolution is assuming that the legislation passed grants cities and towns the right to opt in to hosting a marketplace. That, I believe, is not something the legislature has yet committed to.
That's right.
It could be that the legislature says communities have to opt out versus opt in. So this is actually something that is, I think the league has heard from the majority of their members that communities want the option to put their hand up and say, yes, we're open for business. That's something that you could switch in language if you wanted. Second comment I want to make is I think the way it's currently being discussed at the legislature is that the use would be comparable to liquor establishments. So basically you will, depending on how the legislation came out, your liquor commission would essentially become a liquor and cannabis commission, and you would license it similarly. And there are some things you can control with that. I think the actual control over The location would have to come through a zoning change. So I think we'd have to zone for a new applied use and define what zoning district you were comfortable having that use be in. It would be land use, the same way we say bars and manufacturing and single-family homes versus multifamily homes. I think when we bring that back, if you are okay with us bringing back this resolution at a future meeting, I'd want Eric to weigh in on how that land use change would happen.
Right, because does the zoning control how a liquor establishment does outside sales, such as patios or decks? And
Yep.
if so, are these establishments gonna have that kind of freedom to where they have a smoking deck, so to speak? Does that impact people's safety walking through? Is something I like to think about.
I think that's highly unlikely.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
I don't think as I've looked at legislation, there's no on-site consumption. It's,
On-site,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
it's solely a
Just
retail.
Purchase, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But
It's
I
above
could,
my pay grade, so I'm just asking these questions,
no, it's
that's
a
all.
great question.
Yeah, so I don't think we would need to add any language like that here because we would address that through our own zoning in a future
Okay.
discussion. Do y'all have any concerns? Anything popping up?
I mean, I would just say that this seems like a sensible ask. I think the specifics around the 5%, 70-30 split, like those are very specific things, and I'm assuming that VLCT has a good reason for those numbers, but I think that, as you point out, the general thrust of requesting that some of this revenue be brought back to the communities that are hosting these establishments is on point, and it would just feel strange if we had a liquor control commission that didn't have essentially similar roles as for cannabis, and we didn't have this opportunity through zoning to adjust where it is. So I think that this resolution is on point, but the process is so hard to predict where the House and the Senate are going to end up. So I think it's great to talk about the resolution. I think we should give VLCT the backing if it comes to that, to try and advocate for that in the legislature. But it's also, we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly comfortable with the general aspects of this. As I said, like having explicit numbers, I don't know about that, but if we're generally on board. Is there public comment about this topic? No. If we're generally on board, then we can have Jesse bring this back to us at a future meeting.
Sure.
Sure.
Great. This brings us to the end of our agenda then. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
It can't be, it's way too early.
Let's talk about something else.
You'll
Quiet.
have plenty more meetings. It'll average out.
So,
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Amy. All those in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.